Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Cause Before Symptom. It is just now May 16th. A few days have gone by. Pastor Carner is out mining for gold. I hope he's found something. He's on a vacation right now. How's it going, Boots? How's it going, Scorpion? Nice to see everybody tonight. Boots says they stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. Says hi, Urban Warrior family. Glad to see y'all. Let's hit that like button. He's the guy that reminds us to hit the like button. How's it going, R. Gertison? How's it going? Let's see, King Gravana on YouTube. Thanks for talking about the CCRU. Yeah, I find some of their stuff very interesting. Don't get me wrong, and I actually will go so far as to say that I think that on some things, I think that they do have some well thought out ideas, and I appreciate the honesty. Honestly, the fact that they're pretty open. You know, as far as I understand, Dick Land is, maybe it's demonic. I mean, I'll admit that much. So it's interesting because I see it more or less like this, if they laid the foundation for all of this. I was watching some stuff earlier about it. These tech CEOs are getting angry and saying that it's not helpful, that a lot of people don't like they don't like AI. And so they're saying, how dare you not like AI? And it's like, it only leads to two possible outcomes. One is that they're delusional, and the other possible outcome is that they're psychotic. It's like, maybe they actually do believe this stuff. And as a matter of fact, that kind of leads us into the first little bit I was going to show you to set the stage tonight, because the intro that I showed, the little guys, or the little robots are dancing around. It's on their like little semiconductors, because man, semiconductor manufacturing and engineering is fascinating. So I was going to show some clips from a presentation that is from 2012. The title of the presentation was that semiconductor manufacture is indistinguishable from magic. And so here I'll go ahead and show you the clip here. I got a few clips.
My name is Todd Fernandez. I'm here to talk about semiconductors. There's a QR code on here if you want to follow along on your iPad, Android device, or other. You can go ahead and click that. It'll take you to a Dropbox, and you can follow along on the slides. So I called it inseparable from magic. That's I'm an engineer. I kind of find the term magic a little bit insulting when people refer to my work or the work of other engineers, because it's not magic. It's sweat and blood and mental stability that goes into these things to make them work. I use the term inseparable from magic because from working in the industry, I can tell you that's a fairly standard response. What happened? We don't know. Why does it work? It's magic. And that's from the people who know. So, inseparable from magic. What you're looking at here is the first ever solid-state transistor, Bell Labs, 1947. If you haven't read the book, The Idea Factory, it talks about this in detail. It's incredible. So, disclaimers.
Yeah, I got a few more. Let me put them in here.
So, what are we talking about? Let's do a little statistics first. This is a human hair, scaled up. 40 micron diameter human hair, that's a fairly average human hair. In 1971, Intel released the Intel 4004. That was a 10 micron device line size. So that's a scaled 10 micron. That's in 1971. Here's 1990, 800 nanometers. Here's 2000, 130 nanometers. Can everybody see that dot? If you can't see that dot, raise your hand. Okay, there's a dot there. That's 2010, 2 years ago. 32 nanometer is in relation to a human hair. I did the math at one point. You can put something like a gigabyte of information nowadays. You could store a gigabyte in a human hair with modern transistor technology. So this is the basics. Do we know how a transistor works? So on the top, we have a gate insulator. That insulates the gate material, which is where we flow the current that is the on and off switch, from the body of the transistor here, okay? The last thing on top is the gate itself. What happens in a transistor is we flow electricity through the gate. That generates a field. That enables us to turn the transistor on and off. Okay, so here's what it looks like in practice. This is a research transistor. This is not anything you will ever see in manufacturing. So what you're seeing here are electrical test pads so that anyone who wants can connect to the transistor. So that kicks down into contacts, which are where they actually access things, a source, a drain, and a gate. So if we add power to this with an electrical bias across these two, adding power here connects these two. All right? So here's how it looks in, I guess, Microsoft Art. As we apply a positive voltage, we begin to form what's called a pinched channel. That's electricity beginning to flow across the transistor. As we continue to turn it more and more on and off become relative, which is fun. This is what happens. We actually begin to fully form an on transistor. The parlance that is used in the industry is electrons and holes. So electrons go this way. Electron holes, or the absence of electrons, go that way. We don't talk about, if you think back to high school chemistry, you remember valence electrons. A lot of materials have either one or two elements in their outer valence. A lot of materials have one or two holes in their outer valence. We deal in trading electrons for holes as they move across. That's how we create kind of flow. So, first thing that's going to break your mind, transistors are not digital. So we make digital logic circuits out of them, but they're not digital. This is what the electronic response curve of a transistor looks like. So on the top, on the y-axis here, you have effectively current that is flowing across the transistor, and on the bottom, you have how much voltage we're applying to the gate. There are 4 things you should keep an eye on here. This is off. If you notice, we're looking at, this is a log scale, so 1 to the negative second, 1 times 10 to the negative second, that's not 0. On is kind of a nebulous state where it's mostly on. So we start to talk about things in terms of the threshold voltage. The threshold voltage is where we get that shoulder, where things start to turn on, where things start to behave like they're on and not off. And everybody talks about power and heat in transistors and computer chip usage. This is effectively the majority of what they're talking about. They're talking about leakage. The fact that our off state is not as off as it could be, which is a term that kind of messed with me for a while when I started in this industry. Off being offer is very, very important. So, basics of construction. We're going to talk through some of the tools, some of the technology they're using to manufacture these. All right, so the steps. Here's what a modern transistor kind of looks like. So, first thing is we have our substrate. We have the substrate here in blue. First step that always happens nowadays is what's called shallow trench or silicon trench isolation. The devices are so small, so close together, so kind of not behaving like we want them to, we can just keep control over them, that they have started to do things where they basically insert an insulator between each device to isolate it. It prevents crosstalk, it prevents leakage, it prevents one transistor from turning on another transistor. So that's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is we put down our gate insulator. Here's a part that we know. We had 6 parts. We're going to turn it into a lot more parts. The gate insulator goes down, and it does 2 things. One, it is our gate insulator. It isolates the gate of the transistor from the body of the transistor so we can make it work and not have a short. 2, when we open this up, it self-aligns for us all of the steps we're going to do afterwards. The gate insulator is highly critical, and because of that, they want everything needs to align with it, so they do this step first. Then we deposit our gate. Gate material for years and years and years has been a thing called polysilicon. Hold the question till the end. Thanks, because there's a lot in here I want to get through. It's been polysilicon, which is a different crystalline version of the silicon we use as a substrate. It's more electrically conductive, it's tough, so it can stand up to all of the future processing. That's what they've been using. They're going away from that now. We'll talk about that. We deposit our source and our drain. We dope our source and our drain. So we begin to form with an ion implanter the regions that we want to connect the transistor to that we want to be a transistor. Then we form what's called a spacer. Spacer does a bunch of things. It's not electrically really part of the transistor, but it's absolutely necessary in modern transistors because it contains the gate. It also narrows these openings, which becomes really important when we do what's called our deep source and drain. The initial dopants here were very, very light. Then we do a heavier doping. This allows us to begin to, rather than having a single region for the source and a single region for the drain, you're getting very much towards...
It just draw attention to the fact that these steps are pretty much the alchemical great work when you actually really look into it. So
then we form our salicide. So at some point, we have to connect these transistors to the outside world. If you think about a city, the transistor is your house. Everything that goes above it and allows the transistor to talk to the outside world is the streets, the highways. It gets progressively bigger. The salicides, what they do is effectively, they're kind of a mix of usually a metal and silicon. They form I guess a kind of a gap coverage so that we can actually get them to talk. We do it on top of each, the source and the drain, and then on top of the gate. Then we drive the dopants. So we talked about the two different, these are really like 14 different implants to get this the way we want. Then we set them. We heat it up at a very high temperature, over 1,000 degrees C for less than a second, and diffusion happens, and everything moves around, and we end up with very much a profile in here that can channel the locations and the densities of electrons and holes very much exactly where we want them, so we can control things like the leakage, the threshold voltage, things like that. Then we deposit a dielectric. At this point, we're done making what we would call the device down here. Now we begin to connect it to the outside world. So the first thing we do is we seal the whole thing. That happens so that they can't leak. We don't want electricity getting from one to another, and we want to be able to isolate them. Etch trenches and contacts. This is the first step in having something that it can talk to. We deposit a metal in there. We fill them, what we call fill contacts and trenches. We have a device. Then we do back-end processing. So at this point, we have your house and we have your driveway. Then we start building what they call metal layers, which are the back-end processing that I'm not going to get to really here, but which is what interconnects individual transistors, individual devices into a logic circuit, into logic circuits, into memory, into cores, into everything you need to make a computer chip out of one of these. I talked about these as like, what, 10 or 11 steps here. These aren't steps. These are what we would call, in fab parlance, segments. Like this, 15 steps.
This is just one sub-step.
This whole set, by the time it goes to what you would call the back end, it's about 3 weeks later, if you're good, and somewhere in the range of, I'd say, 500 steps. I'm putting a range on that, but 500 steps. We've done 500 different things, 500 different tools to the wafer. This is what a fab actually looks like. It's about 4 to 5 levels. This is a picture of Samsung's brand new, spanking new fab in Austin, Texas. Nowadays, they're using what's called 300 millimeter wafers. We'll talk about that next slide. But usually modern fabs are about 300,000 square feet of manufacturing space. So that's large. Now consider what's known as a class 1 clean room. Class 1 clean room means there is 1/2 micron particle, 1, per cubic foot. I didn't mix units. You can talk to ISO about that. So as a reference, everybody's familiar with operating rooms. Operating rooms are class 10,000. So if you want to have surgery, this is probably a better place. So wafers. Wafers are cool. These are what we manufacture on. They are pulled. They are actually a single crystal. Everybody think back to crystals and science and chemistry. If I were to take this is an ingot. They grow them like this in a furnace like this using something called this is Kralski. I can never pronounce this word. Process. It's on Wiki. Look it up. They make ingots. We make ingots that are literally a single crystal, and then we slice them into individual wafers. That ingot, if I could look at it on a molecular scale from a atomic standpoint, I could take it, I could turn it on end, cut off the front, cut off the back, and look through a hole between all of the atoms from the front to the back. They all line up perfectly. very important because it's the only way they can make the process work. Contamination levels, about 0.1 parts per billion is the acceptable higher limit. I kind of mentioned FOUPs. This is a FOUP. FOUP, 25 wafers. I'd say you're talking $60,000 in revenue from a bleeding edge wafer in terms of revenue and chips and memory. 25 wafers in a FOUP at 60 grand makes about $1.5 million. This is a bad day. Concept one, don't do that. Concept two, from anyone who's worked in the technical field, the radius of blame. If you notice the time clock, anybody see, can you guys see the time clock there? It's 5:30 in the morning. So, what happened here? An engineer's day just got very bad. If he's not up already, the engineer got woken up now.
So the point is, behind all this, is that I don't even understand how a human mind could have conceived of this process. You need to have a near 100% pure crystal to conduct it. And he's talking as a metaphor, that he's building these little houses and these little roads. Okay, and so, you know, you start to look back at early computing and early information theory, which of course plays heavily into cybernetics and everything that we've been looking at. And so now let's see, you go back and you take a look at the research, and what does the research show you? Well, there's actually some research called Maxwell's Demon. It was a thought experiment. And we're also going to take a look at a book titled Internet Daemons. This is a book, a newer book by Fenwick McKelvey. Internet Daemons. Now, a daemon is a background process, digital communications possessed. But first we're going to go back, because this Maxwell's Demon was a thought experiment from between 1867 and 1871. It might have been, you know, done a few times, or it framed a few different ways, but around that time period. So in 1871, physicist named James Clerk Maxwell conceived a terrifying thought experiment to interrogate the second law of thermodynamics, an inescapable cosmic law that all closed systems degrade into chaos, disorder, and heat death or entropy. Imagine a completely sealed container with a chaotic gas divided into two chambers by a wall with a tiny microscopic trapdoor. The gas molecules are moving randomly, some fast, hot, some slow. That would be what we call hot and cold. Left alone, the system is useless, in dead equilibrium. So the thought experiment introduces what it termed, this is its term, demon. That's what it chose. So, you know, there's a few reasons for that. Because it's supposed to hide, and, you know, you can't really observe it, and it's supposed to observe how entropy works. So, you know, to observe these invisible laws is the idea. So it introduces the demon. And the demon, this being, stands at the trapdoor. It has faculties, which is a word that was from Thomistic psychology, so sharpened that it can perceive the exact speed and trajectory of every single molecule. When a fast, hot molecule approaches from the right, the demon opens the door and lets it pass to the left. When a slow, cold molecule approaches from the left, it lets it pass to the right. The demon does no physical pushing or pulling. It merely observes and sorts. It merely observes and sorts. It doesn't affect the system. Yet through this simple act of gatekeeping, one chamber becomes boiling hot and the other freezing cold. By extracting order from chaos without expending mechanical work, the demon has reversed entropy and created a massive exploitable power source. Here's another diagram of it. The demon opens and closes the trap door, partitioning two chambers in order to move all of the hot particles to the right-hand side and all of the cold particles to the other side, using nothing but information. A heat engine could thus harness useful energy from the temperature delta, in a sense creating energy contra, meaning this violates, it's against the first law of thermodynamics. Entropy of the system also decreases. That violates the second law of thermodynamics. Over here was from a paper that goes even further into this, into higher level demons, you know. And they use this word. I mean, they act like it's whatever, no big deal. So this is describing the same experiment, this right here. On this side, the way that it was explained here is an intelligent being capable of sorting gas molecules by their velocities. By creating a temperature difference, the demon apparently defies the second law of thermodynamics, decreasing the system's entropy without expending energy. And it cites a book, Theory of Heat. So I'm probably going to just mention this, not go into it too deeply, because I haven't really studied through it all the way myself, but that's something for a later video. It's talking about how this can be expanded into something called a Szilard or a Szilard engine, which is a chamber containing a single particle. So right here, a single molecule. This is the working fluid. It's looking at things on a single kind of mechanical level. So it says, is this single molecule, is it on the left or the right? So then you have the temperature, which is the energy source, a surrounding heat bath that provides thermal fluctuations. The engine will rectify. Then there's a piston in the middle. The piston slides back and forth. A massless wall used to trap the molecule and later serve as a piston to do work. And then this idea is that there's a memory, a single bit of memory, the demon's memory. It records the molecule's state. Is it in the left side or is it in the right side? A chamber containing a single particle is initially in an unknown position. A demon measures the particle's position and inserts a movable massless wall with an attached mass. As the gas in the chamber expands at a constant temperature, the attached mass is raised, resulting in work being performed. This mechanism appears to enable the conversion of information into useful energy, seemingly violating the second law of thermodynamics, as the demon extracts heat from the heat bath and converts it fully into mechanical work. But there's a, you know, if we were to go further into this right now, the demon has to forget, because that kind of cheats the whole work done. But the point is they use these weird terms, and you know, it's just weird that we've got this advanced process that you need 100% pure crystal, and you need a operating, it's cleaner than a operating room. It's more sterile than an operating room where they create these semiconductors. And it pretty much perfectly maps to this alchemical great work if you just kind of look at it from a couple hundred years ago, you know, using older terms. But what we're going to primarily explore a bit today is Internet Daemons, because this is a more recent book. Fenwick McKelvey's book, Internet Daemons, which explores the evolution of digital communication through the lens of software, programs, or algorithms that operate in the background of infrastructure. So it's really in the same way as electricity and currency, it's flow control of the flow. They call this packet switching, which we have touched. I've briefly mentioned that in a previous show. And that's kind of why I wanted to give a few people the chance to maybe have seen that one if they're here tonight, I don't know. Or if they watch this in the future, if they already know about this terminology, hopefully I've familiarized it a bit by now. So the author of this book, Fenwick McKelvey, he argues that the internet is possessed, quote unquote, by these daemons, these algorithms, these programs that operate in the background of infrastructure, which are responsible for flow control, the process of managing packetized. A packet of information is a standard formatting. Flow control would be the process of managing these packetized data to enable diverse network applications to coexist. The text traces the intellectual lineage of these programs back to Maxwell's Daemon, a physics thought experiment that inspired early cyberneticists to view information processing as a means of creating order and meta-stability. Meta-stability. That word always pops up. It's everywhere. Everywhere. Meta-stability. Meta means dead in Hebrew. And it's also, I've got this one ready to go. Here we go. And it's also associated with the golem. So meta-stability, which just kind of means this almost, I forget the exact definition. I don't, I'll have to see if it's in here. By examining the development of packet switching at ARPA in the National Physics Laboratory, the author highlights how these automated intermediaries perform daemonic, DAE, daemonic optimization, subtly dictating the speed and reliability of our online interactions. Ultimately, the book positions daemons as an essential yet often invisible agents that shape media infrastructure and contemporary power dynamics in the digital age. How's it going, Philip? Nice to see you tonight. So that's why we kind of did a little bit of a primer on the Maxwell's Daemon experiment. So this is kind of talking about the plumbing of the internet, the piping of the internet, if you will. It's not a series of passive pipes, but a medium possessed by inhuman intelligence, that being an algorithm. These ways to make things more efficient. So looking back to 1871, the mind of James Maxwell. In his celebrated thought experiment, Maxwell imagined a being that could sort fast-moving gas molecules from slow-moving ones, acting as a gatekeeper to reverse the natural flow of entropy or disorder. By the 1940s, a cybernetics researcher named Norbert Wiener, the father of cybernetics, adopted this daemon as the ultimate symbol for information processing. Wiener's defining insight was that information is the negative of entropy. That was what Norbert Wiener, the cybernetist research founder, he's very big name. Some of the books have factored into the research that I've done and presented. Norbert Wiener said, information is the negative of entropy. In a universe tending toward heat, death, and chaos, the work of a daemon is not merely a technical chore, it is the active organization of change. The active organization of change. The daemon creates meaning by tirelessly fighting back the disorder that would otherwise render our data silent. By the 1960s, MIT hackers transformed this imaginary being into a software reality. The daemon, a program that performs essential tasks without human intervention. If anybody's used Windows, it's just like if you open the task manager and you see all the programs running in the background. That's a daemon. It's just what it's called in a Unix or a Linux operating system environment, which is what a lot of web servers run on. You know, because you don't have people using them with monitors and whatnot. They are, you know, usually use some type of Linux software. So the three essential traits of a daemon, first being background oriented. It lives dormant, behind the scenes, far removed from the user interface. So when I first started looking into this subject, my idea was that these hypothetically map into the human. And so background oriented, that would mean possibly the subconscious mind or the fight or flight part of your mind. It's background oriented, which means you don't think about it most of the time, but when you need it and it's happening to you, you will see it and it'll come out. Tireless, it works continuously, possessing the pipes of the network to maintain an ordered functional state. It's condition triggered. It's never explicitly invoked by a user. Instead, it lurks, waiting for a specific environmental condition or event to trigger it, like fight or flight. While these gatekeepers begin as metaphors for molecular sorting, they become the vital solution to a very real problem of managing the expensive, limited time of the world's first computer networks. So back in the old days, before the instant internet, batches and real-time war rooms. To appreciate the modern daemonized internet, we must first understand the rigid systems that preceded it. Before the web, the human-machine relationship was defined by a profound speed mismatch. The researcher J.C.R. Licklider identified this as a speed mismatch, noting that for true man-computer symbiosis, so this is an old term, very old. They were talking about this a long time ago, and back when you had the Temple of Set with Michael Aquino, who had all his initiates read Cybernetics and Man is a Machine on man-computer symbiosis. That's what he was having his people read in their satanic cult. So people would, on the outside, you would think that they're reading some spooky satanic book, but no, they're reading man-computer symbiosis. Machines needed to communicate in a shared time with humans. This desire for a collaborative symbiotic relationship led researchers to seek a way to move beyond rigid batches toward a shared time, achieved through packet switching. So we have system type right here, batch processing, interaction style. In batch processing, programmers submit batches of cards and wait hours or days. The primary speed bottleneck being that physical input and output speed in card sorting is that it was physical input and output, being that you had to do this all manually. So it was a one-sided human-machine relationship. The machine is a cold tool, not a partner. In a real-time system, instantaneous feedback for military defense or business reservations, massive hardware costs limited to closed world simulations. This was an enclosed and reactive type of relationship. The machine manages a specific reality. And I would argue probably the stage that we're at now, the time sharing part, I would say that that's probably, if not fully merged into our time, it's very close. So this would be when multiple users share one central machine simultaneously. In almost a way, it would be like live streaming, truly. Because look at it like this. Somebody can watch this video in like a year. You know, if it's on YouTube, somebody could watch it, or Substack. God knows it probably won't be on YouTube, because YouTube takes stuff down randomly just for no reason 2 years after I post it. But only the people who are here watching it live get the experience of what I'm saying right now, because, you know, it won't apply whenever somebody's watching this looking back. So we're sharing time right now. We're spending time together. Processors' ability to multitask through scheduling daemon. In a way, what they're talking about, if they're putting forth this hypothesis in the 70s, 60s, 70s, whatever, they're trying to think of what ultimately became this type of time sharing. And ultimately, to do that, all of us have to have a device that's connected to the internet, which involves packet switching. So this is a symbiosis, which is exactly where we're at now. Partnership between man and computer. So how does packet switching work? First, probably should just... This is what packet switching looks like. So these data packets take different routes to the destination. Now, that implies that there's some type of way to resolve the order, which would probably involve some type of algorithm. May or may not, but it probably does. And so, you know, I've got a huge book. It's called Circuits, Packets, and Protocols. It's a big book that's talking about how these regulations went into effect, and how did packet switching come into being. And it started mainly for nuclear, having nuclear survivability to make sure things didn't go down in the event of an attack during the Cold War. The caption, this was from Wikipedia. It said, "This animation illustrates a network model in which consecutive packets between hosts take different routes. Out of order delivery is, however, detrimental to the performance of several network protocols, including TCP. So the internet attempts to route packets associated with the same data stream along the same path most of the time." So from the book Circuits, Packets, and Protocols, is kind of where we're looking at right now. A guy called Donald Davies revolutionized digital communication with the concept of non-synchronous communication. Instead of one message hogging a line, which would be a synchronous, he proposed breaking data into packets. This allowed the internet to become a network of networks, where vastly different streams of data could coexist on the same wire. So this is kind of like a switchboard. If there are some people who still know what that is, I know some people probably do. Not everybody. The person my age would not know what a switchboard is, but I know what a switchboard is because this is the only way you can compare it to somebody, really, because I bet the early forms, because the CIA and stuff wasn't around yet, but these early, ways of picking up intelligence for the state, I imagine they had a great time when switchboards and stuff were around. I bet they were picking up so much stuff on people. And it's the same idea. It's like an eavesdropping center. And today they have the same thing. It's called a fusion center. And every town has a fusion center for the flock cameras to feed back to, and for there to be aligned to all of the different intelligence agencies. So, and they probably have contracts with Moloch packet switching software. Sorry, Archime packet switching software. Let's see, I gotta show this off because this is just too hard for me to even believe sometimes. Sometimes this stuff's even too much for me, and I've seen a lot. Here. Yeah, so there's really a network analysis and packet capture software, and it's now called Archime, but it was originally called Moloch, and they had to change the name of it because obviously that was probably weird when somebody Googled, you know, hey, I'm trying to look for your company, and the Canaanite deity of child sacrifice came up instead. Or did they want it like that? Maybe they wanted it like that. You never know. You never know these days. So to manage this, the 1968 ARPANET design included the interface message processor, which is an IMP. You know, like a little minion, an IMP. It's an IMP, an interface message processor. It's not just a piece of hardware, it's a clever software-driven node that functioned as the internet's first true daemon. The source context of circuits, packets, and protocols identifies 8 duties, which we can distill into 4 intelligent categories of software responsibility. Those being segmentation and reassembly, breaking host messages into packets and rebuilding them at the destination. These are algorithms. Each one of these 4 points is an algorithm that needs to have standards, and it will have these standards that have been written by people who are experts. You notice how people they're not doctors and they're experts now. They just call them experts. And so these need experts on the packet switching, like our friends at Archime Packet Switching. They might be an expert who can be consulted for this algorithm. So segmentation reassembly. Second is routing. Calculating the best path for data to travel across a complex shifting topology. Buffer management. This handles temporary storage for data in transit to prevent system lockup. Coordination and measurement. Communicating with other nodes to monitor network health and detect faults. The final responsibility is measurement. This is what made IMPs clever. It allowed the daemon, the background software, the IMP, to monitor its own performance and self-correct. The individual IMPs created what the researcher Oliver Selfridge called, it's what he called it, a pandemonium, or a pandemonium. A screaming chorus of software agents shrieking at one another to reach a collective decision on what data should flow next. Decision makers, buffering, routing, and flow control. So what makes data feel fast or slow? The result of micro decisions made by daemons using flow control algorithms. They decide whose packets are prioritized and whose are sacrificed. So the modulations of flow control. Queuing, metaphor as a bucket. The leaky bucket. Imagine data filling a bucket with a hole at the bottom. Data leaks at a constant regulated rate. If the bucket overflows because you are sending data too fast, the extra packets are discarded, spilled, and lost. Token bucket is the second. Here, the daemon gives out tokens for transmission. You can use tokens for a sudden burst of speed, but once the tokens are gone, must wait for more to regenerate. Crucially, the token bucket strategy preserves data. It discards the tokens, the capacity, but keeps the packets in the queue. We have routing here. Hot potato. Daemons use hot potato routing to pass data to the closest neighbor as fast as possible. A daemon may choose a longer physical path if the shorter path is congested, prioritizing the optimal flow over the shortest distance. And again, here's the very basic diagram for this. So then I have some of these slides, and we'll go through those and kind of cap out this subject. And it's basically summing up everything from the Internet Daemons book as well. So now that we all have the context, because now everything that's kind of mentioned here will be much easier to piece together. Users assume the web is a neutral void. It is actually a highly managed ecosystem. In 2006, eMule and BitTorrent users noticed a mysterious recurring connection drop. Cause wasn't faulty wiring, but Comcast deliberately throttling peer-to-peer traffic. And it did it through these background programs, which exist to orchestrate, delay, and drop the data flows. And these are just multiplying at an insane rate, because that's exactly how Flock and Palantir, it does this on just a grand scale. Conjuring control out of chaos. So we already talked about Maxwell's demon, sorting gas molecules to defeat entropy. In the 1960s, MIT time-sharing computer researchers adopt the term daemon for dormant background processes in the 1960s. From imaginary physics to real code, daemons became a solution to maintaining digital order. I like this graphic better for the experiment. Post-World War II, Cybernetics founder Norbert Wiener applies Maxwell's daemon to information theory. Wiener determines daemons could be found everywhere, working to prevent entropy through active control. Embedding intelligence in the infrastructure. JCR Linkleiter envisioned man-computer symbiosis, bridging the speed mismatch between human thought and machines. Interface message processors, IMPs, were installed as the very first internet daemons. IMPs divided messages into chunks for packet switching, using something probably that preceded the Moloch packet switching software, now called Archime. Routed those packets independently, and it didn't have to be in a specific order. The order would be sorted out at the end destination. So to achieve this, ARPA network required an entirely new digital communication infrastructure. The infrastructure itself became an active participant, making decisions about data survival and speed. The screaming chorus of Pandemonium. Oliver Selfridge envisioned a demonic assembly to recognize patterns. He called this architecture Pandemonium, a black box filled with specialized cooperating demons. Data demons convert signals. Computational demons find patterns. Cognitive demons shriek upon recognition. A master decision demon selects the loudest shriek to execute an action. Today's internet functions precisely as this pandemonium. And it sure does when somebody says something that, if you piss somebody on the internet off, you'll know what pandemonium means real fast. with millions of programs collaborating to enact flow control. Honestly, you just have to give somebody a compliment on the internet now and they'll get mad at you. It's like people just get mad at you for nothing anymore. Assembly line of control. Starting on the left, the gaze, packet inspection. Daemons, read packet metadata. Metadata is just kind of data that comprises the, this is what a packet includes. That's the metadata. And it reads this to identify network type, origin, behavior. It should also be stated that, Swift and the ISO standards, it's the same thing. The ISO 222, which is going into effect this year, which is mandating that origin metadata be included on all financial transactions. It basically, wherever the transaction, wherever it originated, it has to include that on the object, the transaction object, under this new ISO standard. But this is it's the same thing. A packet protocol is the same thing as a financial protocol. It's just somebody else writes the rules. So it looks at the metadata to identify network type, origin, and behavior. It judges it, it queues it based on programmed priorities. Daemons order packets into strict hierarchies. The path, routing. Daemons direct digital packets through specific physical infrastructure, altering speeds and latency. And that would make the packet switching software with the owl logo, that would make that the switchboard. That would be the same thing as an old telephone switchboard. It's a packet capture software is what they were selling to companies like Verizon. That's why Verizon was hosting the Moloch conference. Let's see if I still got that. I hope I still got that. Yeah, here it is. We'll bring that up just for good measure. This is from like 2020, and it was archived. The Verizon Media will host the 3rd annual Moloch conference, and it's because they were doing business with what is now called archive packet switching software. I wish, like, this is just the icing on the cake. I mean, it's crazy that they're doing the work for me. It's like I didn't even have to make the words up. They got it all there for me. They wrote the grammar. Moloch is a large-scale open-source indexed packet capture and search system. It's used within Verizon Media and other companies to help store and index network traffic for analysis. If your company has a network security team as part of your blue team, oh boy, you'll want to attend this event. I wonder if there's going to be entertainment. So these daemons, these background processes, which somebody writes, and it's, written by experts, manipulate jitter, reliability, and bandwidth in nanoseconds, micro decisions. This distributive agency dictates which networks succeed and which crash. So these are the two competing visions for the optimal web. On the left, non-synchronous optimization, the goal of which being to accommodate all networks equally. The architecture being dumb pipes with intelligence at the edges, the locus of control, user applications, the human effect, unpredictable, chaotic freedom. Polychronous optimization, the goal, manage and tier traffic for predictability. So to sort it into a tier system, a pyramid tier system. Architecture, smart. Core with massive surveillance power. Locus of control, autonomous policy, daemons, and ISPs. Human effect, tiered, commodified anxiety. Can you guess which one we got? Polychronous optimization as one, consolidating power to back corporate network owners. Shocker. Suffering from buffering. On the left, flow-controlled registers effectively. It disrupts the physical and emotional rhythms of users. The spinning loading icon functions as a modern sigil, representing the Daemons' interference. Isolation on the left, frustration on the right. This aesthetics of lag creates temporary emotional distress and an enduring unrecognized anxiety. If you were on the internet back in the day, you remember the loading circle. You still probably remember it now if you're in bad service environment, but it's not as bad as it was back in the day. Users internalize the blame. Did I download too much? Did I break it? That may be back in the day. Daemons prime humans for connection, deciding who feels present, who feels excluded. There's a lot you can do with these if you control the algorithm. Emotional economy of speed. Differences in network performance create a new digital divide. The optimized versus the disoptimized. Especially if you were, in gaming or whatever, connection does sometimes matter in some, environments. ISPs articulate these effects through advertising, commodifying the feeling of fastness. Relief from the Daemons' interference is sold back to the user as a premium managed service. Meaning, literally, this whole concept of speed and whatever, it's always been just a program that they can give you so much speed. Like, that's what it's always been about, flow control. Commercials weaponize the anxiety of delay, like missing a synchronized flash mob due to lag. Speed becomes a marker of social privilege. Slow connections equate to social exclusion. Taxonomy of resistance. How do users fight invisible forces? 2 dominant strategies have emerged to survive the pandemonium. The pirate on the left. Method 1, illusion and escalation, relying on encryption, darknets, and VPNs to blind the demon's gaze and hide traffic. Method 2, public accountability, bootstrapping public awareness via network audits to expose software daemons and force regulatory action. These are a lot of, they're trying to implement more of these and make everything less transparent is where we're currently standing right now. Tactical vacuoles of non-communication. Pirate Bay realized open protocols were too vulnerable to packet inspection. They shifted tactics from accelerationism, rapid and open spreading, to escalationism, secrecy. They deployed the iPredator, a bespoke virtual private network to encrypt packets, creating vacuoles of non-communication, tactical meaninglessness that daemons cannot decipher or judge. The paradox, illusion fuels the state. Building darker networks forces ISPs to build smarter daemons. And this has actually really been the interplay that brought us to how have these tech surveillance companies, how have they gotten so big? It's because of the red team and the blue team. So maybe that's the blue team that Verizon was talking about. Maybe they're Democrats and the other guy drinks Coke and you drink Pepsi. Democrat, Republican. It's red team and blue team. Pizza Hut or Domino's. Conjuring a public through measurement. In 2010, Canadian World of Warcraft gamers suffered mysterious targeted disconnection via Rogers Internet. Because demonic flow control is invisible and highly individualized, users initially blamed themselves. Gamers crowdsourced data using MLab measurement tools acting as a reflexive apparatus. These tools acted as mediators, rendering the invisible work of Cisco routers invisible to the public and regulators. The public formed only after the algorithm was audited, proving that making Daemons visible is the first step to governance. An enduring ecology of control. Daemons are evolving beyond routing. They now coordinate AI, the Internet of Things, and ubiquitous computing. Another word that I'm hearing, especially if you go and watch my series where I read the 6G white paper it's a good 10 episodes, I think. But I read through pretty much the whole thing, and the phrase that keeps coming up is pervasive artificial intelligence. That's the word that I keep, or the phrasing. That's what they dedicated to in that paper, pervasive artificial intelligence. Daemons are evolving beyond routing into the Internet of Things, now bio-nano things, medical body area, network Internet of Things. They just mix the words together at this point. The Internet is fragmenting into proprietary networks, operating systems speaking unintelligible machine languages, and the AIs they have like their own little language that they can speak. If you like I can't remember what it's called. It's called Gibberlink. Look it up sometime. It's fascinating. So the original debate remains: do we fear entropy and demand strict control, which is the Polychronous model, or do we embrace chaos, believing disorder is not necessarily bad and the void is not always empty, which is the CCRU perspective, would be the second. An enchanting open internet requires us to risk living with the unknowability of the future. Sure does. That was the end. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely some fascinating stuff, especially with the words being the same, the way that these semiconductors are made with these perfect crystals. You know, I've got a text titled Living Crystals of Atlantis, and it talks about this hypothesis that, you know, if there was a previous advanced civilization that they were using as a technology, some form of crystalline device. So if that's the case, I do argue that it would make sense that this technology is, or, you know, the process for creating these semiconductors that also, again, perfectly match the alchemical great work. It's a fire, water, air, and earth device. Could even argue the philosopher's stone in a way, the silicon chip. But what's happening is things are just getting so small, and once things get down to, you get down to that level of infinite microscopic, down to the atom, and they have got meta atoms now. Meta atoms, which we've talked about in a couple of the other shows. Meta atoms, because if you add meta to it, there's something there. I don't know. But what happens is, I think that the actual process revolves around reversing entropy, or quote unquote, supposedly. It's probably how they're getting the power, is because they can get these things so small, which increases the way that he phrased it later in that presentation, is that they're making offer. They're making on sooner, and they're making the difference between on and off sharper. Making off offer, making on sooner, making the difference between on and off sharper. That's how he described it. And then they do this at an increasingly smaller level. I think what they're doing is that's how they're able to combat the entropic process. But yeah, you said the quintessence. I think this is related to it all. I think this is completely 100% related to everything that Nikola Tesla had access to and was researching. And then we know that Trump's uncle got access to that research as well. There's also a very fascinating thing that I didn't even get into, but it's called virtual photons. Virtual photons. And that's a whole rabbit hole in of itself, but they just, basically, we'll never be able to see them, but we know they exist, and we can never observe it, but if it doesn't exist, the math doesn't work. And so they have these things called virtual photons. And I don't know, it's a fascinating set of research. I think there's a lot of fascinating, even if you just learn all of the steps to making a semiconductor, it's just crazy, because how could you have ever come up with that process? I'm really tempted to think that it's not the first time it's happened. I don't know the dates, I don't know how long, I don't know by who, but I don't think it's the first time it's happened. And the Bible pretty much completely affirms all of that. So I think this actually lends credence to, you know, the first flooding, you know, everything that they had done before and leading up to Noah's Ark, the flood. There was this sometimes I'm bad with the details, but I remember specific things. And I had listened to something about they inscribed this wisdom on the two pillars, but one of the pillars was designed to survive a flood, and the other pillar was designed to survive a fire. And so it was set up so that one of them would survive no matter which way the world ended. But that would imply that they were aware that there was a chance it would be one or the other. So I don't know. But there's nothing new under the sun, that's right. And with that, guys, I think I'm going to probably wrap it up a little bit early tonight. I think that timing was great, and probably get some rest because I'm pretty tired. It's late over here. It's 1:09 in the morning. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed and learned something new. If you haven't already, hit the like button, hit the follow button on whatever platform you're on. If you're on Rumble, if you're on, I think Substack's got a like button. You can hit the like button on Substack. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitter, if you're on wherever else I'm on. I think I'm on Odyssey too. Hit the like button, hit the follow button, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. I think James will probably be back in a few days. He didn't exactly give me a day. He just said he would let me know when he's back. So, but he's hopefully found some gold. He better find some gold, because gold is going to be what you want to have for what's coming. Gold and silver. Anybody who tries to say crypto is out of their mind. Crypto is down. It's down. So take care, everybody. I appreciate everybody being here. I will see you again tomorrow. Take care.